And Josh Scacco is an assistant professor in Purdue's Brian Lamb School of Communication.
He joins us now to discuss the Democratic Convention and how it's been going so far. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me back.
So it started out a little contentious. We had, a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters not on board with this in the delegates. Talk about that and where we are. We saw some people last night still anti-Hillary and pro-Bernie.
Day one was a little bit rocky for the Democrats, just as day one for the Republicans was a little bit rocky. But what you saw was after Bernie Sanders gave his speech, after you saw the explicit appeals to both candidates to come together and have the delegates come together, by day two things kind of leveled out, and by day three I think you saw about 90 to 95% of the folks in the arena being on the same page.
Last night the big speech was delivered by President Obama. How do you think that went?
You know, Barack Obama is an exemplary speech maker, and he can get up there and give a speech that is memorable and equally engaging for many people. He made a convincing case for Hillary Clinton in terms of trying to bring over independent voters. That might not necessarily have happened because independent voters are already turned off to President Obama's policies. But in terms of engaging Democrats, which is very important, especially after the Bernie Sanders night on day one, I think that did quite a bit for bringing them on board.
It was a really powerful speech last night. We watched that. What can we expect tonight? I know Mrs. Clinton is still working on her speeches as we're talking, I'm sure, but what can we expect from her tonight?
Secretary Clinton has a tall task ahead of her, which is the American public already knows that she is qualified, that she is capable of handling this job, but they don't trust her. And so what she has to do is convince the American public that she's trustworthy enough to be president. This is actually the exact opposite issue that Donald Trump had at the Republican convention last week. The American public gives Donald Trump high marks for being trustworthy and saying it like it is, but they don't think he's qualified. So tonight what Hillary Clinton has to do is reach through somehow and convince, that segment of the American public that still isn't quite convinced that she can be trusted with the office of the presidency.
You bring up Donald Trump. If you could, take a look at what we saw in Cleveland last week and compare that to what we're seeing this week in Philadelphia. How do these two conventions look when you look at them side by side?
The Republicans have a task of indicting the past 8 years in Barack Obama. So that meant that their tone last week had to be more negative, more pessimistic, which is what you saw. Donald Trump's speech was considered dark by many commentators, just absolutely pessimistic. In contrast, the Democrats have the responsibility of defending the policies of the past 8 years. So they need to sing Happy Days Are Here Again and talk about how great things are in America. And that's what you see in terms of the tonal contrast between the two conventions.
All right, interesting to be in your line of work in the past couple of weeks.
Absolutely.
Josh Scacco from Purdue's Brian Lamb School of Communication. Thanks so much for coming in again this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Good to see you, Josh.